Well, good morning, brother. How are you?
Doing well. Just a beautiful Texas morning outside,
Ah,
chilling.
as I said earlier, man, you are looking very Texas these days, so I'm happy for you.
Trying. I don't want to get kicked out of the state.
So, we've known each other for quite a while. I've always been interested in, I think I think you know this, but a large part of what I do in working with the military community was inspired by you. Of course, there are other people. Don't get a big head about it, but you know, the stories you've shared with me over the years and everything, I've definitely wanted to help those in the military. Of course, Indiana has no active bases, so I'm not on a well. We do have an Air Force base over in Fort Wayne with some really cool planes, but
The reserve base,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So, um, but I got to follow your career for a while until this last step. I don't even what was your official title?
Uh, in the Navy?
Yeah,
Oh, what I did, CCS?
CCS, right? And so that
Yeah,
that takes into account DEI, right?
correct. And military equal opportunity
Military
combines
equal
the both.
opportunity. So I was just talking to a guy last week. I was on a podcast called Normalize It or Normalize This with somebody who does work in accessibility. And I really thought I was going to learn more about DEI and accessibility, but really we just, as I was a guest on his show, we wound up talking more about what I do. So I didn't get the education I wanted. I've been meaning to ask you these questions for a long time, but I figured, you know what? If I'm curious, I would guess a lot of people that listen to this are probably curious too. Joe, what is DEI in the Navy? But then what is DEI? We know it's taken a bigger presence in a lot of hiring practices, a lot of companies. What is it?
So DEI, CCS, MEO in the Navy is essentially it's more of a complaints and grievances process, right? You're trying to make sure that people are being treated equally, fairly. Everybody has the same chance to succeed, and we do that through surveys. We have SEMIO, Command Managed Equal Opportunity Advisor, who interacts with the sailors all the time, really tries to get a feel for how they're doing. Is everybody got a chance to get the best evaluation possible? Is everybody getting a chance to get awards equally and advance their careers unimpeded? Essentially is what we do in the Navy, and it's incredible. It's a great job.
Now, see, that's interesting because that really comes into conflict with a book I'm reading now, which I think it's part fiction, part real, called I think I told you about this, called Punk's War. Somebody referred it to me, and it's about fighter pilots on aircraft carriers in the Middle East around post Desert Storm, probably early 2000s. And of course, the story they tell, the author was a previous fighter pilot, is not one of everybody getting equal opportunity to advance. And in my experience with you and other people in the military I've talked to, uh, that seems pretty more common, right? It's about who you know, not what you do, or at least that's what I've been told. How did your work change that?
Oh, that is a great question, and it is a fight,
Okay.
right? It's a fight every day because um, there's overt and there's covert when it comes to discrimination, right? Whether that's sexism, racism, based on political affiliation, you name it. If people can categorize other people and use that against them, they will. It's just human nature, right?
Mhm.
So covert sexism in the Navy is rampant. I mean, it just is. It's a male-dominated uh, military. I mean, the military is male-dominated. So kind of weeding out sexism it's been a fight. It's been a fight since we first introduced women into the military. Oddly enough, in the Navy, 200 some odd years ago, right, since the very beginning. But sexism is very overt. Your covert is other things that people don't see, right? And it's the guy who doesn't feel everybody's equal. So maybe the people that work for him, the guy or the woman, people that work for them don't get the same evaluations, don't get the same opportunities to succeed, right? And those are found through patterns and history, and those are a lot harder to find.
But
Would I love to tell you that everybody in the Navy is treated equally and everybody has the same chance to succeed? I would love to tell you that, but I'm not going to.
No. And that's, I think that's sad. I mean, because we expect our military, it's so regulated and based on rules and structure. But as you said, that structure doesn't always exist the same for everybody.
It just doesn't. I always say, people say we're fighting discrimination, we're fighting racism. We're not. We're fighting human nature,
Tell
right?
me about
And
that. What do you
human
mean?
nature's, well, we have a saying in the Navy that ducks are always going to pick ducks,
Mhm.
right? And I always use the friendship test. You know, even in the civilian world, it's who you know,
Mhm.
right? And sometimes who you know is who you surrounded yourself with. So that's the people that you grow with, up with, and they think like you, and they look like you, and they act like you. So it's human nature to trust that person and to bring that person into the fold. Is it discrimination on your part? No, not intentionally. You're
Mhm.
just picking the people that you trust and that you have something in common with, right? You're interviewing two guys for a position, three people, let's say two guys and a woman, and you went to Texas A&M and the first guy went to Texas A&M. You can't stop talking about Texas A&M, talking about the Aggies, you're talking about this. Next guy went to Georgia. Not such a huge fan, right? And
Right.
you're like, Georgia's okay. And then a woman comes in and she didn't play sports, right? And so she's trying to find that common denominator to have a conversation, and it just doesn't feel right. And
Mhm.
you're thinking, I got to work with this person for X amount of years.
Mhm.
You know what? We're going to travel in cars together. We're going to be in planes together. We're going to change the world. I think I'm going to go with Aggie's guy
Mhm.
because we have something in common.
Mhm.
Is that discrimination? Is it sexism? No, it's human nature. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
what we're
it's not
battling every day.
intentional discrimination or intentional sexism,
Not,
but it does happen. And so, okay, let's go back to what you said. We are fighting human nature.
yeah. Okay, so beginning of time, right? Tribes, people conquer other people, and then the winning tribe determines the rules. Correct?
Sure.
Beginning of time, Rome, Greece, uh, shoot, you can look at all the wars in Asia, you can look at
Mhm.
the wars in Europe. So every single time, the winning people, the most powerful people, the majority set the rules. It's just human nature. It's what everybody's been doing since the beginning of time. So equality is not a human idea, right?
Mm.
If you have a house, do you want your house to be equal to everybody else's, or do you want your house to be the best? Or do you have this or that? Are you going to start giving your stuff away to the neighbor so that you can feel on the same level? Or do you create your house the way you want it? Not isolationianism, but
Mhm.
you know, it's the idea that if I win, my rules rule.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've been doing that for, well, as you pointed out, centuries. So then how does that translate over into the modern workforce?
So again, the concept of equity, of inclusion,
Mhm.
right? So inclusion, so
I mean, those
in
are
the
the big
modern workforce,
buzzwords right
diversity,
now, right? Those are the big
they are
buzzwords.
diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. So when we're talking about diversity, diversity is easy. In a
Mhm.
company, to create diversity, to find diversity, you go find people, you get them to apply. They don't look like you, they don't act like you, and you hire them. And diversity is a check in the block. We're good to go. We have created diversity in our workforce.
Mhm.
And then companies are failing in equity and inclusion
Well, hold on. Let's
because
go.
they don't
Okay.
understand. Go
Go.
ahead.
Okay. Well, yeah. So this, I mean, it almost sounds like when you say check in the box, it's about, boy, I don't even like saying this. I mean, this used to be the way it was said, but like you're filling quotas with people, human quotas, human capital.
So if a company's statement is we want to increase diversity in our workforce,
Mhm.
right? That's their goal. It's their mission statement. So yes, that's a check in the block for them.
Okay.
And that's a good check, right? It's not a bad one. Hey, we want to evaluate people equally and we want to bring in the best candidates, and we're looking to bring in more people that are of a diverse nature, because diversity in any organization is a positive thing. Always is. Diversity of thought is incredible.
Right. Right. Diversity is, but diversity along what spectrum? right? Because, or most people that listen know that, I'm a big fan of the Myers-Briggs type indicator, right? The MBTI. We categorize people's personality preferences and how they relate to the world, whether they're introverted or extroverted. Well, that's a measure of diversity, right? You want plenty of introverts and extroverts. You want plenty of people that can make good decisions and plenty of people that maybe take more time. But we're not talking about that kind of diversity. We're talking
We're
about
not.
diversity based on, is it
Race and
race?
sex.
Okay. Why is that a good thing to have diversity based on race? And I'm really playing devil's advocate here, but I am genuinely
No,
curious. Like, why those two categories and not other ones?
because how we see the world is based on how we grew up, and the color of your skin, your sex, everything forms how you see the world, formulates this idea of what the world is. And when you surround yourself with a bunch of people that have basically had the same type of ideas and the same types of experiences, they look at the world a certain way. For example, I can use a military term just to get somebody to understand. I was an ordnanceman, right? Bombs, missiles, bullets, the whole 9 yards. So I always picked mentors that were not AOs, because all AOs look at things the same way, right? If my phone is broke, how I get a new phone is I break it worse, right? So that's unrepairable, and then I get a brand new phone, right?
Okay.
Easy day. My mentors would be like, well, try calling this person and try doing this and troubleshoot it, and then you might not need to break your phone more. But if I ask every AO in the Navy, they're going to say, just break the phone worse and you'll get a new phone. It's the same thing in companies. If you hire a bunch of people that look like you, think like you, act like you, and you ask, hey, what's the next big idea? It's going to be the same idea you have.
Yeah,
They're
we call
going to
that group
reinforce
things, right?
what you already think. Yeah, group thing. But if you pull somebody who has faced adversity in their life because of where they come, has faced racism, has faced discrimination, has had doors shut in their face, and you say, hey, what do you think the next big idea? It's going to be based on how they see the world.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a positive thing.
But are
to
we
get a
interviewing
different
for those
perspective.
qualities, right? Yeah, I agree with you, but are we like, does the modern workforce interview for those qualities, or they just say, okay, well, if you're a person of a particular race or gender, well, you face different adversity, so we want you to come in on that.
I do not know how they're hiring right now.
Okay.
I don't want to answer for that, but I would say there is a huge trend. I mean, every company that I interview for, every company that I send my resumes to, their mission statement is that we want to hire a diverse workforce, which
Okay.
is great. But are you doing it the right way? Are you hiring them to get, like you say, that check in the box?
Mm-hmm.
Are you really hiring them because you want that infusion of new ideas? You want that infusion of that human offering their ideas and their perspective of the world. Are you ready to listen? Because a lot of companies aren't, and they don't understand inclusion, and they don't understand equity, and so they bring in a workforce that leaves 2 or 3 years later, and they're leaving.
Oh, that's it.
And
Okay.
if you look at it,
So that's fascinating.
but
So if you hire for diversity, you can check that box. You bring in people of different understandings, backgrounds, but then, okay, so then what is the equity and inclusion part? Why is that failing?
well, we'll start with equity. Equity is giving everybody a chance to succeed, right? And people who have all grown up the same way, all have, use accountants. Okay, so we could use accountants, right? So you got your standard white male accountant who's gone through this, and this, right? He went to school, he went to this training, he did that training. It was very easy for him. Someone who may not have been a white male, hasn't had the same training, right? Hasn't had the same opportunities, maybe didn't get the same education level. Who knows, right? There's something different about them. But if I'm going to evaluate you based on what I've been through, that's not equity, right? I'm just evaluating me. What I need to do for you for equity is, what do you need to be successful?
Mm-hmm.
Do you need certain training? Do these working hours work for you? Do you need a mentor that doesn't look like you or that does look like you? What is that mentor going to do? Are you an introvert that in order to go to the next step needs to get in front of people?
Mm-hmm.
needs to be in charge of this, right? So equity is really defining what a person needs to be successful all the way through their career, and then giving them those tools to do that, instead of just saying, well, hey, it's on you. You know, if
Right.
you want to be successful, you be successful. Even though the last 6 managers that I promoted were all looking just like me, but that's probably because you're not trying hard enough.
Interesting. Okay. So how do we assess for equity, and how do we provide it? Or how does the Navy do that? I guess we should start there.
Well, ooh, man, the Nate. Well, I mean, it's a lot on your leader, your next
Okay.
leader. If
Okay.
they're interested in providing equity, then they're going to be the person that's going to help you out. So, if your next manager, if your next line leader, if your supervisor, your vice president, whatever it is, if they're interested in you, then you're going to have that equity, right? So in the Navy, it's how do you study? How do you learn? Because we take a test to advance, right? Evaluation. So how can I sit down with you, and what's your best way to study? Is it flashcards? Is it doing it? Is it hands-on? So we have assessed that. And then it's, what do you need for evaluation? Well, you need collateral duty. So you got to do something outside your normal job, right? So do you take over this program? Do you do this? Because the more your face is in front of the command, the better it is for you. People recognize you. They understand your name. So in the Navy, we do a lot of stuff like that. Like, how can I make you successful? In the civilian world, it's much of the same way, right? You're based on evaluations. You're based on how you do your work performance. So how am I as a leader sitting down with you and getting you the best opportunity to succeed?
So
Because it should be
equity,
different for every person. Go
yeah,
ahead.
absolutely. Everybody has different needs, but so then equity really is on the hands, on the shoulders of the leader to assess and understand their people, to know their people and know what they need to succeed.
It is. It's a very different culture. Like, even in the Navy, when I first came in, our generation, because you and I are around the same age, you're a few years older,
Easy.
was all of, was all about, hey, just go to work, get the job done,
Hmm.
right? No excuses. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know about it. I don't want to know about your family. Just go get the job done. When I first came in the Navy, that was the motto. Check your feelings at the door. We were productive. But since, and I had a lot of great leaders that really taught me about this, about understanding humans, understanding the people that work for you. And so when I adopted that philosophy, and I adopted that my sailors were humans who had problems, who had needs, who weren't always vocal about what they needed. And I delved into their lives, productivity went through the roof. I mean, it just really did, because happy, successful sailors humans will always be more productive than the person that's sitting there suffering in silence.
Hmm.
And it is kind of asking them how their life is. I had a great senior enlisted leader who said, how you doing? How you really doing?
Hmm.
Because he always said the first answer was going to be, I'm fine. He said the
Yeah.
second answer is when you really find out what's going on in life.
I think that's so important, and something, I mean, I have to encourage a lot of the company consulting I do, right, for different leaders and leadership growth and things like that. Like, reminding people, like, you are a leader, which means you have to know your people, which means you actually have to come out of your office, or come away from meetings, or step away from all the emails, and go see those people that you're leading, because nobody will follow somebody they don't see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Right. You and I
every
know, we're sitting there going like, yeah, absolutely. But unfortunately, right, like, I know in my role, it's almost too much rainbows and unicorns. Like, well, yeah, that's just what I expect. But then in the workforce, different, companies I go into, corporations, manufacturing plants, like, the leader is locked away in an office on a separate part of the plant for, days on end. And people are like, man, I haven't seen that person in quite a while. So how can they expect equity if they're not even seen as a person, but also just visually seen throughout the workday?
they're just basing reality on what they see their lives, right? Well, I did this, when we do it with our kids. Well, I did this and I did that, and look at me. And it's like, but the environment and the parents aren't this. There's nothing that's similar, and yet we
Right.
hold this idea. Um, it's I went through it and I was successful. So if you do the same thing, you'll be successful.
Right.
And there's no way to emulate that, right?
Right. I think that I know I cringe whenever I hear myself saying, well, back in my day, or when I was your age. And I know my girls don't cringe, like their eyes just roll to the back of their head, like, oh, here he goes again. And then I mean, it's even better like when I hear my wife do it, because then I get to say, you shouldn't do that. And well, that never works out well. Yeah, that doesn't work out well either. So what you're saying is, when we reflect on our own past and try to apply it to our children or our people we're responsible for leading, we are not being equitable.
You're not. You're basing the world on your vision and what you've been through, and the circumstances are not the same.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same struggle in the Navy, trying to get leaders in the Navy to do the same thing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
They don't understand it. I did that. I was that way. I was very locked away in my office. You know, I sent an order through one person and it spread, right? And I expected the fruits of my labor of giving an order to manifest itself into production. And it just was not happening. And a very, very dear friend of mine said, I want you to do something. I want you to go out there and I want you to tell somebody thank you. And I was like, man, they get a paycheck. Why would I ever tell them thank you? They get a paycheck. They've got, there's no reason. He's like, I just want you to try it. Just go out and tell somebody thank you. And I begrudgingly did it. And I remember it was the most awkward thing in the world. I'm actually still friends with the guy, I think. And I went out and I was like, good job, man. You did great today. And I thought he was going to die. I thought he was going to keel over. A couple days later, so I was my failed attempt. I was like, I'm never doing that again.
Let me ask you, just for frame of reference, at what stage of your career were you? I'm guessing
I was an E6. I was an E6.
So where was this? 20, how many years of service?
About 10 years, 10, 12 years.
So halfway through.
And I was just this alpha male, angry individual who just believed you do your job and that's it. So I went out and I thanked this sailor. He was a E3. A couple days later, he came into my office and he said, can I talk to you? And I was like, yeah. He said, I was having a really bad day. There's been a lot of stuff going on. And that really helped. I just want you to know that. Wow. And it was fire. I was hooked. That was it. Yeah. I was like the most positive, shooting rainbows. You know, I'm out there every day thanking everybody just for showing up to work, and just evolved my life into, I wanted people to be able to talk to me and to be able to share what they were going through. And once that happened, you know, I thought, man, everybody's just going to use me. They're just going to whine. And it didn't. It turned into this environment that carried me through the rest of my Navy career, of where my sailors would say, I need this and I'm struggling with this. And we would work to solve it. And it would be like, hey, I got to go do this for a couple hours. And I'd be like, okay. And they would go do it. And then they would come back to work. And I'm like, what are you doing? And it's like, hey, you know, you gave me this. I'm going to come make it up. You need me. We need to do this. And I was flabbergasted that I thought they would take advantage, and they never did. Once somebody invested in their lives, the return was 100-fold.
So what you're saying is, as a leader, as a manager, as a supervisor, if you actually care about the people you're leading, they will perform better.
100%.
100%.
That sounds odd.
Well, and I mean, in my world, it doesn't, because that's what I do and that's what we do. But you're right. Again, going into different corporate consultations, I think people forget that. It becomes too much about the product, the thing, the bottom line, the dollars. And it's, I don't want to say easy, but yeah, I guess it's easy to forget about the people that do that. And so hopefully, just, you know, those that are listening to this conversation are hearing that and realizing, like, and that, I guess that's true for anything, right? When we talk about psychology, when you invest in another person in a relationship, it goes both ways, and people are more productive and perform better when somebody gives a damn. So that's diversity, equity. Tell me about inclusion, right? And you listed a whole bunch of other letters, right? Let's DEI. What else?
There's DEI&B, inclusion and belonging.
Okay. And then you threw out like MCOSC, what alphabet soup?
Military Equal Opportunity, or CCS, or when it comes to the corporate work, CCS. That was just Command Climate Specialist. So when we did into the Navy, it was about climate, right?
All right, we'll get there. I'm writing that down.
Okay.
Command climate specialist. Okay, so diversity, equity, we're on inclusion, but I got to go back real quick to your talk about equity. I meant to bring that up. Like, it's funny to hear that story, because in the past, this is the benefit of having somebody I've known for a long time to talk to. In the past decade, all I know you as is that happy, positive, hey, how you doing? I can just imagine you out there on a ship, like, hey, what's going on? Thanks for showing up for work. That's how I've experienced you in the past decade. But if I do go back 25 or 30 years, yeah, I do remember that angry guy, right? That I'm just going to go get it done. So I could imagine how that transferred over in your initial years in service. That it sounds like that event was quite transformative for you.
It probably saved my life, in all honesty.
Wow.
And I don't say that lightly. And the person who did it is Paul Giddens, who just happens to be a comedian and a very good friend of mine. And I tell him all the time, at least once a year, man, you saved my life, because high blood pressure, stress, at home, I wasn't the father I wanted to be, because I was Navy 24/7. And a lot of people are that way. You're just so, it's such a powerful thing to be in the military, right? It is. And you either hate it or you love it. And when you love it, and I loved it, but it never loves you back, right? And it'll take so much from you. And I was giving it all, right? I would sacrifice family time. I would sacrifice games, whatever it took, because I loved the Navy and it was providing so much for me. And when he did that, and then I adopted that philosophy of getting to know my people, it was also about getting to know me. What did I need to be happy? I was already successful. I was already an incredible leader. I'm sorry, but I was. But it transformed it into, how can I make them better humans?
Yeah.
Because a great human will be a great sailor. A great sailor is not always a great human. And it was a mentor that taught me that too. He said, we had this sailor and he was a great sailor. And he said, but is he a good human? And I was like, no. And he's like, then he's not a great sailor, right? Kid was getting in trouble. He was doing all kinds of bad stuff. Aces at work. And he said, our job is to create good humans, because they're not always going to be sailors. And so it was about a 3-month where I was just going through this crazy transition of my whole vision of what my life was in the Navy was just changed. And I became the father I always wanted to be. I became this guy that was like, I can't show up to that. And, I remember my chief was like, I thought he was going to yell at me. I was like, I got to go. My kid needs me. And he said, okay, I've been wondering when you were finally going to say something like that. And
so
yeah,
let me go back, man, because I want to simplify this, because I am in the line of work I do, and people listening, we all know that person that is at work way too much, 50, 60, 80 hours a week to try to bring in more money, and sacrificing family and health and stress and heart rate and all that. You're saying simply telling another person that you were responsible for, thank you, 2 words, changed everything for you.
It really did. It was a domino in a long line of dominoes. Because I thought yelling at somebody and making them do it, I was getting results, right? I really was. If I yelled at a young sailor and I said, I need this, I was getting results. No doubt about it. When I appreciated them and I cared about them, the results increased, because I didn't have to yell or ask. I remember one time, we were slammed. We were handling all the equipment for every jet on the West Coast, right? Every jet from Washington State down to Houston, Texas. So we were in Lemoore, California, and a mod had come out. A modification to one of the pieces of equipment came out. And so we had to change every piece of equipment, thousands, probably 10,000 pieces of gear. And I had already done this transformation. It had been about 6-7 months into it, right? And my chiefs were like, we need to go to 12 on, 12 off.
Oof.
Which is brutal, like 12 on, 12 off, 6 days a week.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's not just a 5-day a week thing in the military.
No. And they're like, you go tell everybody. Yeah, of course. Let me, which that's part of ownership, right?
Right.
So I pull everybody together and I'm like, hey, we got to go 12 on, 12 off. I'm going to do everything I can. You know, we're going to make the best of this. And I was expecting, you know, to get murdered right there on the spot. I mean,
right.
It's shore duty. It's not sea duty for the Navy. This is our time to spend with families. And 90% of them cats were like, we got you, A1, you know, easy day. We got this. And they were upbeat and they were positive and they were happy. And we were ordering pizzas and we were doing, music was cranked up, right? We were having, I mean, we literally were having a blast. And production, we thought it was going to be 6 weeks, ended up doing it in a month. Like they really, those men and women killed it. And they were like, look, you do so much for us. It's easy day.
Yeah, because you had a relationship with them, they were willing to do. And I think that's something that any leader in the military, public sector, anywhere needs to understand. People are wired for connection. When we have a relationship with them, they'll go that extra mile.
But it's hard, you know, when you're talking DEI, when you're talking leadership, when you're talking relationships, those are not a dollar, right? So when I talk to a company about really investing in DEI, right? You can't have one person do it for a 6,000 person company. That's not gonna, you're not investing in DEI. You're getting a check in the block to say we have a diversity officer or a diversity director. So you don't really care. But see, you're going to pay that person. So that comes out of your bottom dollar. So for me to go to a company and say, look, this is going to make you dividends. This is going to make you more money. I can show you statistically how inclusion and diversity, but right now I can't give you a dollar amount. So the bean counters, the accountants are like, it's not worth it. We're doing fine now. We're going to get this check in the block and he'll do everything for us or she'll do everything for us. And then that person is ice skating uphill.
Right. I couldn't imagine being one person trying to change the entire culture of a 6,000 or bigger company.
I worked with a company that had 18,000 plus employees. Wow. And 90% of their diversity inclusion team was people that were doing it on the side of their other job because they believed it.
Wow.
And I said, so you're not paying them anymore? And they're like, no, you know, they want to do it and it helps them to promote. And I'm like, then you're doing it all wrong.
Right.
You can't do that. So you're impacting the quality of life of this human so that you can say you have a large diversity team. You're failing. You don't even understand the concept of inclusion and equity.
So let's talk a little bit about inclusion. Then I do want to hear your opinion on like, how does it get done? But all right, let's define inclusion first. We talked about diversity, equity. What does inclusion mean?
Inclusion is about those meetings and understanding your workforce and them having an input, right? So, hey, we're firm. Our working hours at this company, you know, you need to check in at 8. 8 a.m. is the first meeting and we're done at 5. And that's it. It's hardcore. Well, what about the person that lives on the other side of town where that's in the middle of rush hour and they can't do that? Or the daycare that they go to, their hours stop at 4 or any number of things. And those hours just don't work for them. Do you include them in that conversation? Or do you only include all the people that are rich enough to live within 2 miles of the company, get there very easily? My commute's only 15 or 20 minutes. What do you mean you drive for an hour or the subway? Or what about the dress code, right? Do you really need to wear a shirt and tie every single day? Do you have to do this? Do you require people to go buy a wardrobe and spend money just so they can present within the same meeting of the same people that they say every single day? You know, it's all these factors that you're including the essential inclusion, are you including your workforce so that everybody has buy-in? And that's what it's, if you make a decision and we kind of all have buy-in, I'm down, right? Hey, you at least asked, it didn't go my way. Hey, let's proceed forward. But if you're not including anybody, and a big one for the Navy, I can give you an example. I think inclusion fits it perfectly, is hairstyles for women. Hairstyles for women forever was a tight bun in the back of the head, had to be that way every single day to show up to work. And that decision was made by a bunch of white males. And it was made by a bunch of white males forever. And then we had one MCPON who said, I'm going to get the input of everybody, and brought in some females, some minority females, brought in all different females and asked them about their hair. And we've changed to ponytails. We've changed to all kinds of different regulations for how women wear their hair in the Navy now. And it's a great thing, because if you're comfortable at work, then you work. And putting your hair into a bun, not that I know, even though it could be long enough to do so now. I remember one chief, she said, I spend 45 minutes on my hair trying to get it perfect every morning just so I can go to work. Wow. That inclusion is understanding that and say, hey, if you throw it in a ponytail, you're done in 2-3 minutes, and you can show up to work and you can still perform your duties.
Right. So inclusion is the idea of important decisions are made with the input of the people that are going to live under that decision.
For the most part, I mean, not every decision,
Sure.
know, not every decision is going to be made, but when it comes to company policies and stuff like that, I think you should get the input of your employees.
Yeah.
You know, I think you need to ask them, like, hey, how do you feel about this? Does this work with your life? Does this impact you? Does this, yeah. It's making them feel like they can go talk to people and that they're going to have a voice.
Well, and that certainly impacts people's mental health. Now I'm curious though, my experience, just observing, certainly the pandemic and the lockdowns have changed that in ways where more people are now working from home in a very casual environment, or even offices have become much more casual, much less regulated, maybe. Like, where else would you see inclusion being important in a civilian company?
Hey, I was just thinking about this not even 6 seconds ago. And I think when we talk about, and I literally had the thought while we were talking, we talked about leadership, right? And getting to know your people. That's inclusion. So it shouldn't be DEI. It should be which is a very bad acronym, but IED, right? But if you think inclusion first, right? So everybody kind of has input. You get to know your people. And then you go through equity, right? You're giving them that chance. You're giving them the opportunities. Diversity will come. I've always told every company I've worked for, if you don't start with inclusion and equity, your diversity will never matter, right? Think about how much money a company spends on a new hire. You bring them in. So you had to recruit them. You brought them in. You may have to relocate them. You may not. Maybe it's virtual. Then you have to indoctrinate them. So you spend all that time putting them through the company programs, through the welcome aboard. And then you invest time in them with training and understanding products. And then you invest time in them over 3 years trying to help them succeed. But you don't understand inclusion and equity, and they leave. You lost all that money. Then you go recruit somebody else. You come somebody else. But if you understand inclusion and you understand equity, diversity will always come to you. Inclusion, you go ahead.
No, you go.
You had just asked about inclusion in a company and other ways to see it. I think, when you're talking about the virtual, I think that's inclusivity, right? Bringing people in. Hey, how can we help you? How can we make you a part of this team? Hey, we're having this big meeting. Did you invite everybody to the team, or did you pick 3 or 4 people to come into this meeting, right? Did you invite the secretaries? Did you invite the assistants? Hey, we're having this big meeting. Come in, listen in. What can we do? Is there something we're missing? It's feeling like you're not going to do something without me. Then I'm excluded. But if we're part of the same team, we used to call them smoke deck meetings. All the biggest decisions, this is still true. But all the biggest decisions in the Navy are always made at the smoke pit, right? We laugh about this. I mean, it's been that way forever. So I was excluded when I quit smoking. I was no longer in an inclusive environment. But because out at that smoke pit, you're having a cigarette and you're bouncing ideas, and then suddenly a decision's made.
Mm-hmm.
And a decision's made that fast, and it sounds like a great idea, and it was made without any of the other team.
Right. And it was
right?
made with in the groupthink atmosphere of those who smoke.
Yep. And the same thing happens in a civilian company, right? Hey, we'll go to lunch real quick. Right. And they go to lunch and they're having a panini, right? And a beverage. And then suddenly, hey, this sounds like a great idea. Let's push it out through the company, send the memo today. That's not inclusivity.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of these ideas really, I mean, as I hear them and you break them down, aren't as mysterious as maybe as they seem out in the public, but it's really just a factor of good leadership, knowing your people, choosing diversity, choosing good candidates based on diversity, and not just knowing somebody, getting people's insight on decisions and making sure everybody has a chance to succeed. It just sounds like good leadership. Why all of a sudden in the past few years has it become such a buzzword?
Because if it was that simple, okay, perfect example. As a CCS, I had to be involved in every evaluation period, every awards board where we would sit there and talk about the awards. And a female chief came up to me and she was upset. And she was like, I don't understand why we need you here. Like, we can't make this decision on our own. And I was like, if you could, I wouldn't have a job. So if everybody was just making hires based on unconscious bias and not looking at a person's name or skin tone or what sex or their sexual orientation, if everybody was doing that, if everybody felt like they could talk to another human without any kind of apprehension, right? If you haven't been surrounded by the LGBTQIA plus demographic, if you haven't been surrounded with people and you've never interacted, that's going to be uncomfortable for you the first time. So what are you going to do? You're going to avoid it, right? So if you take away all those factors, no, you don't need a position called the director of diversity or DEI. But I always say human nature, people have real issues getting out of their comfort zone. And it's, am I not going to have anything in common? Am I not going to be able to talk to this person? What if they don't think like us? What if they want something different? And it is great leadership. But we have a lot of factors in our lives that steer us.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a good point. It takes great leadership to make that happen. And we don't always have great leadership in different places that need this the most. And that's why people like you are certainly called in, or honestly, even people like me in some ways. We should team up and do this a little bit more often. That's these are good conversations.
May the force bring us together.
So let's go to that, right? DEI, obviously just factors of good leadership, but important ones that need to be paid attention to. How do you make that? How does a company change and start paying attention to that? How do you instill these principles into a 100 or 10,000 employee company?
Well, you're not going to fix anything you don't know is broken, right? And most people think the engine is chugging along and everything's fine. So a great way to do that is a survey, right? And an honest survey on a Likert scale, where agree, disagree,
right?
And never have a neither agree or disagree. Make people make the decision, right? And so using this survey and getting it out there and having people take it, right, and be honest about it, and include a comment section. In the Navy, we do one annually, and there's about 17 pages of data to go through, and then there's about 75 pages of comments.
Wow.
And I always tell the people that I was training in leadership, from commanding officers always down, that data is okay. The comments are going to tell you what's going on in your command. And I would break down the comments even in data. And so I would take all this data analysis, and I would take it and I would say, okay, so here's a picture of your organization. Here's a picture of your company, and here's what's happening. And I would pick out a few comments. And that gives you a starting block. Mm-hmm. But it all depends on if you want to believe it or not.
Right.
Because I can give you all the data in the world. Yep. And I've had commanding officers that say, great, we did the survey. I don't care. I'll see you next year. Unfortunately, a lot of those were relieved. Right. But if you don't want to listen, and you don't want to understand, and you don't want to see what's going on within your organization, bad things happen. Yeah. Same thing in the civilian world. Right. I can give you data. There was a company that I did a data analysis for on diversity, right? So I met with the head HR for this region, and she said, hey, just do a quick data analysis of what you think of our region and different companies in it, right? So they had about 7 different offices within this region. So I went, and the first thing I did was I took the size of theirs and I compared it to like companies of the similar size in the same region, right? Because you can't compare a company in Arizona for diversity as you can Utah, right? 2 different demographics. So I take like companies in the same region, and I would break it down diversity wise and managerial wise and the whole 9 yards. And I went to her and I said, you have a diversity issue. And she's like, really? And I said, yes. So out of I think it was 9 offices they had, 8 of them were run by women. And I said, your diversity is abnormal. Is there a reason? And she went into, well, men aren't as into healthcare as women are. And, she had a reason for everything. And I said, you understand that from the outside, just numbers wise, this looks like discrimination. She's like, it can't be. I was like, why can't it be discrimination? She's like, because women are in charge, so minorities in charge, so that's a good thing. I said, I didn't say it wasn't a good thing. It says discrimination. I said, if it was 8 of 9 men in charge of all these companies, would there be a problem? She's like, well, of course there would. I said, you're not really understanding discrimination and diversity. So I can give you all the information of what's going on in your company or your organization, but if you've already got a set of reasons or excuses, I just wasted my time.
Yeah. What would be the point? So it is interesting, right? I hear these ideas. I'm like, yeah, that they all make sense. And maybe to somebody that, I'm kind of fortunate to sit in my office and work with really resourceful individuals that understand these kinds of things, or I get to teach them. But obviously, because this has become such a need in our culture, not everybody out there gets it. It becomes about the bottom line and maybe not the people. So I'm glad we have people like you out there promoting these kinds of things. Obviously a very necessary thing in our workforce today.
I think so. And I hope companies are doing it for the right reason, right? I hope you're getting a diversity director or a manager. I hope you're getting them for the right reason, and that really is to make a difference. And I hope when you're hiring people, you're hiring for the right reasons, and you're giving them the opportunities to succeed and to fulfill whatever role in their own lives, because that's what it's about, right? It's as a human, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do, and how can we help you get there? Right? Well, I want to be the vice president of this. Okay. So I'm the vice president. So how are you going to get to me, right? And how are we going to make that? I was talking to a company. I'm sorry, I don't know if we're wrapping up, but I was talking to a company, and they were all about diversity, right? We're DEI, we're DEI, we're DEI. And then every time there was a promotion, it was like a white guy at the top. And they said, we don't understand why this is happening. I said, I told you in the beginning, ducks will pick ducks. So how do you fight that? Like, well, we don't know. I said, I'll tell you how you fight that. Your next group that you bring in, your next group of interns, right? Your next group of what you see the future of the company. One, make sure it's diverse, right? So we got to have a diverse, we got to recruit diversity, look for diversity, right? Because we want, and you raise them together.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, when the duck picks the duck, he's got a full pond to choose from, right? Because they went through the same classes together. They went through the same training together. They promoted together because they were all given the same opportunities. So then, instead of this white guy having 4 white dudes that he's known his whole entire life, now you have one human, regardless of sex or race or sexual orientation, who's been around a plethora of people. And now when he's going to pick, or he or she is going to pick somebody, they have a bunch of people to pick from that they've known forever, that they're comfortable with.
Yeah. And
so
that just makes sense. Right? That just makes sense that you're building a better company that way. It makes sense in our conversation. I get it. Out there in the work world, it isn't, right? In our little screen right here, like, yeah, duh, that makes sense. But no, you're right. In the world, human nature is, ducks pick ducks. And that is, we are working against human nature to make human nature better.
Yes.
To make our companies better.
I mean, it is. I mean, whenever anybody asks me why I do this, right? Because I am not the atypical person fighting for diversity, director jobs and all this stuff. I'm not saying there's not, but everybody I've always talked to, most of the people I knew in the Navy who were doing CCS work did not look like me, right? Which I think is a good thing. Again, diversity of thought. And they always ask, well, what got you into it? And I'm like, I want to make better humans. I honestly, I'm here to help the company. I'm here to do whatever you need. But if I make better humans, the world's better. Your company's better. Everything's better. So I'm not trying to make your company better. I'm trying to make every human in your company better. And your company being amazing is a byproduct of that.
Right.
And you'll see it. So that's what it's about. You make good humans, you make better humans, the world is better. Selfish that I want to make the world better. I want to feel good, like I did something.
I don't think we can talk much more or get any better than you make better humans, the world's a better place. That's pretty awesome stuff. All right, man. I could talk to you probably for 4 or 5 more hours, but people out there listening to the podcast, like, no, you guys can stop now. Man, thank you. I've been so looking forward to having this conversation and sharing it with other people. You and I have had many a good conversation over the past 30 years. This is just another one, but it's cool that other people hopefully maybe benefit from it. And, maybe some leaders out there are listening going, oh, I need to bring this Joe Paul in to have a conversation. I'm sorry, we can't just call you Joe Paul. So, I mean, do you want to give your official retired title from the Navy so I don't get it wrong?
No, Joe Paul's fine. I did retire Chief Petty Officer Paul, but Joe Paul is just fine. I love the Navy.
I was going fancy with like Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, retired Joseph Otto Paul, but no, we'll just go with if anybody wants to find out more about DEI and the work you're doing, can find me, and I will connect you with this amazing person that wants to grow better human beings. So I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. You are welcome to come here and talk DEI and the Navy and military anytime.
I love you, brother. Thank you.
Love you too, man. All right.